Deputy Superintendent Jones, we're on item 6. You're going to do an introduction here. We've got a report from our land trust. Yep, here he's coming. Okay.
It's me again, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones.
Good morning, me.
We're grateful to the board for the opportunity to present this agenda item. As many of you know, there were some significant changes by way of House Bill 404 to the structure, if you will, or the oversight of the school land trust funding. So without further ado, Chair, if we could invite Director Plant up to the table, and then she's going to introduce you, give you some background on what those changes were, and then we'd ask she'll introduce a key individual that was hired as a result of that too. So. Yep. Okay, Paul, if you can introduce yourself and give us some more details on 404 and the changes.
Okay, Director Plant.
Thank you. Paula Plant, I'm the director of the School Children's Trust section here at the State Board of Education. I'm going to try and give you a little bit of background leading up to hiring Justin Atwater, who I'm going to introduce to you in a few minutes. This House Bill 404 that created a new system for advocacy for the trust. The first item that had to be dealt with was to create an advocacy committee. And the advocacy committee has 4 members. They have specific responsibilities, but our first responsibility was to hire an advocate so we could have an advocacy office. So the first step was to get that advocacy committee in place. The official name is Land Trusts Protection and Advocacy Office, but for purposes of this discussion, I'm just going to call it Advocacy Office, because that's kind of a mouthful. But so there are 5 members of that committee. 2 members are appointed basically by those who work with the trust funds, and 2 were appointed by those who work with the lands. And then the last position comes here from the State Board of Education, and code says it's the person who directs and operates the school land trust program. So the state treasurer had an appointment. He is also the chairman of the SITFO board, the fund board, and he appointed Mel Brown. And many of you know Mel from his involvement with the trust. He created SITLA, created SITFO, created the school land trust program, and many other things along the way. So he was the treasurer's appointment. The SITFO board then also had another appointment, and they appointed Brigham Tomko. Some of you may remember that he was your appointment to the SITFO nominating committee for 4 years and had indicated interest in continuing his work with the trust. So we were very pleased that he was willing to accept that appointment. The SITLA board decided that they wanted to have former board members represent them on the committee, and so they appointed Tom Bechtel, who has experience in oil and gas, and also Steve Osler, who has experience in real estate. The 5th member of that committee then is myself. So we had a committee established so that we could start to get some work done. Our first assignment then was to get a director of the advocacy office in place. And our assignment, the committee's assignment, was to send 2 names forward to the state treasurer, who then would appoint that director. And so the state treasurer appointed Justin. This is Justin Atwater, and appointed him, I think it was in March? It was in March. So he's been on board for about six going on 7 months. Our second assignment, the committee's second assignment, then was to participate on the SITLA board nominating committee. And they make a recommendation. They send 2 names forward to the governor, who then appoints the board member. And we completed that assignment, and the board appointed Warren Peterson, and his first official meeting will be this September. So we've completed those big assignments, and now we will start meeting in quarterly meetings on a regular basis beginning this month. So that's just to kind of bring you up to date on the establishment of the new committee, the new office. I'm going to introduce you to Justin because he's the one I really like for you to meet and learn to feel comfortable with, because my goal since the signing of that bill was that you would come to feel as confident about him being your advocate as you have anyone in the past, that you would recognize this as a positive change. And so Justin's background experience, he has a bachelor's and a master's degree in accountancy from Brigham Young University. He has a law degree from the University of Utah. He has experience with real estate development, both on the investment side and on the development side. Has significant experience from the legal side, and he also has interest in teaching like you do, and he continues to teach classes in accountancy and law and real estate. So I think we were very pleased as a committee to have someone of his caliber to be willing to apply and accept the job. So I'm going to turn the time over to Justin to talk to you about what he's been doing, his vision for the future, and give you a chance to ask him any questions. Justin.
Thanks, Paula. It's great to be with you this morning, and I do want to. Going to come out a little further. I can lean in. I'm used to standing, so I can get uncomfortable on the edge of my seat. I want to compliment Paula first and foremost. You have a great director of the school Children's Trust Program. She is phenomenal in her knowledge and background and understanding, and has been a true warrior in this process for our office as we've gotten started. And I want to compliment Paula for that, and thank her for all of the efforts that she has put in and continues to put in. I also want to acknowledge in the back Jesse Stewart, if you want to raise your hand. So Jesse, we recently hired Jesse a few months ago to assist in the advocacy office. The office consists of 2 individuals, myself and Jesse, and there's a lot to do with 2 people, and I'm really grateful for her willingness to join this opportunity and jump in and get engaged. She's fantastic and is doing a great job for us as well. I want to make sure I leave plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions, because as I took this position, I had the opportunity to go back and listen to all of the minutes on the floor and the committee meetings with respect to House Bill 404. And I know that there were some expressed concerns both from this board and from others related to the board. And so I want to be sure that I leave time to answer any of the questions or thoughts, whether they be hard or easy, that you might have. Given that, I know that there are members of this board that are relatively new and may not have a lot of experience with trust lands and the trust program. And so I want to back up to the beginning, 1896. A long time ago, and just impress upon all of us in this room the importance of education that you already know, but even at the founding of the state of Utah, and how miraculous and important I think that is for what Trust Lands does. In the Enabling Act, there are 13 or 14 sections, so not very many. It's a relatively short act. It's essentially a contract with the people of the state of Utah and Congress that says that, yeah, we'll let you be a state so long as you do these 13 things. And among those things were lands specifically set aside, and I'll focus on lands for common schools, sections 2, 16, 32, and 36 in every township in the state of Utah was set aside for a very broad concept called support of common schools. That's really all Congress gave us. Here's lands to support common schools. No more guidance, no more direction. Here you go figure it out. And first and foremost, to me, for them to put that as high as establishing a state legislature, voting rights, districts, and all of those things, for them to say that public education is that important, not that I'm suggesting people in 1896 weren't smart, but it certainly tells me that this is a legacy that was bred in all of us and something that we must protect. And so from that humble beginning, you look at where Utah is today. Utah obviously accepted the Enabling Act and those responsibilities, and what it has done in the creation of an agency, an agency specifically dedicated to the management of those lands, also known as SITLA, and more recently, establishment of a financial office that is responsible for the investment of proceeds from SITLA and the permanent fund. Pretty amazing concept that no other state really has that level of depth and understanding of how to manage these lands in a proper way. The expertise is truly in the right place compared to other states. So I compliment the state of Utah for so doing. Now House Bill 404, 2018 comes in, and I know there was a lot of angst as to what its intent was and what its purpose was, and I want to clarify for you the way I see it. Many of you, we know we have attorneys on the board and others that are familiar. You probably all have a trust, and you've probably given everything away to your children already, and you're hoping that your trustees manage that trust properly. So basic trust principles, I think, are important to understand as you think about the advocacy office. Every trust obviously has a grantor, a settlor, which in this case was the federal Congress. Every state has a trustee, which in our case is the state of Utah, the legislature. And then every trust has beneficiaries. And sometimes those concepts get mixed up. The trustee owns legal title to the land, but the beneficiaries own beneficial interest in the land, meaning they receive all and reap all the benefits from the land and the permanent fund. What is missing there is a phenomenon that came in the last half decade, which is referred to as a trust protector. And a trust protector in today's vernacular is typically a person or an office that's responsible for ensuring that the trustees fulfill their fiduciary duties. And so I want to point out first and foremost, the Lands Trust Protection Advocacy Office is a trust protector, something that never existed in the state of Utah until House Bill 404 came about. No other state has it. We're the only one. We're a pioneer. And we're a pioneer in a good way. A trust protector ensures that fiduciary duties are fulfilled. And that is critical to the beneficial interests. And that is broad in scope. It gives the advocacy office the opportunity to not only receive information and participate in meetings, but there are actual sticks that can be used by the advocacy office to enforce and ensure that those things happen. So I want to that idea number one of a trust protector for the advocacy office. Idea number two is this idea of advocacy in the title of the office. So this is different than the advocacy that the School Children's Trust Program has done for years and continues to do. This advocacy is clearly in the statute to encompass not just the school community councils and trust land distributions to common schools. It is really to educate the world and advocate for the original grant at the Enabling Act. So it's much more broad. It covers all of the other 11 beneficiaries. It covers more than just distributions to school children. It covers advocating for proper incentives in legislative realm. It encompasses advocating for education in realms that don't touch trust lands. And it's a role that's quite frankly overwhelming for one person to wrap their brain around, and something we'll continue to work on. But I envision it as something where we stand up against and behind you in all circumstances with respect to public education in common schools, and not just narrow in scope, very broad. The third role of the advocacy office pursuant to the statute is probably the one that gave you most concern and most pause, and that is direct representation of beneficiaries of the trust. And I want to talk about that and then give you some time for questions. The The new component of this representation is that for the first time, there is a designated representative for all 12 beneficiaries. And I know that you essentially represent 3 of those beneficiaries, the K through 12, the School of the Deaf, and the School of the Blind. Those are within your jurisdiction, and those are 3 of the 12 beneficiaries that I will also represent, along with the other 9 beneficiaries. So when I say representation, that's different than trust protector, and it's different than advocate. Representation truly means if you, the beneficiary, were in the room during a discussion, what would you say? What would you do? What would you want to hear? What would you want to know? That's what representation is in this context. So I truly, as I sit there in meetings with CITLA and CITFO and understand their issues, I speak on behalf of the beneficiaries. And I take that seriously. I want to ensure that I understand your best interest in being able to fulfill that duty. So what does that require? It clearly requires that we become familiar with one another. And Paula mentioned that she continues to stay actively involved, and I continue to encourage that active involvement. This is not trying to push Paula out. In fact, in more instances than not, I need Paula's feedback and information because she communicates more directly with you than I do. But I do want you to know, and I hope, that there's a direct line of communication with this board and the advocacy office, that we can be a support in that specific role when it comes to issues you might have. And know that you can call me on my cell phone at any time, and know that this is what I've chosen to do during the prime of my life, not for monetary gain, but out of an altruistic motive, that I truly believe that this is a critical component of public education and public health and wealth. I have 4 boys of my own that are all in the public education system, a 13-year-old that just started junior high and a 6-year-old that just started first grade. So I've got a long way to go. And I have a real interest in ensuring that they become the best people they can become, and at the same time that everyone else's children become the best they can become. And I know that this is a really small part of that. I'm not naive to think that somehow we can conquer the world through the School Children's Trust Program, but I'm also smart enough to know that it means something. I've met with plenty of people in the system, and I know that it makes a difference. And it's preservation of this program that's critical and important, and I will fight for that every day until the committee kicks me out. So with that said, I'm more than happy to take any questions you might have. I might defer to Paula if you're asking me anything to do with numbers, but otherwise I'm happy to engage.
Board Member Lear.
Thanks for that explanation. I was one of the people that was not a fan of this. I'm still not a fan of it. And you've given us a lot of information, and that's no reflection on you, and certainly no reflection on Paula. But what I didn't hear, and as I reread the statute once again, and aside from it just making me mad, which, and I'll let that go for now.
Sure.
I still see nothing meaningful that the board can do. Can you just tell me in like 25 words or less, one meaningful thing that the board can do aside from, there's lots of words about appointments and meetings and oaths of office and stuff like that, but I don't see one meaningful role for the board other than to just be a cheerleader. So
Sure.
Can you tell me something different?
Yeah, I appreciate the question.
In a short
Yes.
answer. Okay.
Yes. So the most meaningful thing you can do is that the primary beneficiary of the school trust not the school trust program, the Enabling Act, is public education. 96% of the land and money that's invested is under your jurisdiction. You are constitutionally appointed to supervise and oversee public education. So, what does that mean? This office, all this office specifically, let me talk about first globally. As the real representative, you are the real representative of K through 12 and deaf and blind schools. So you have direct beneficial rights with respect to trust lands. You have the ability to receive information as common law trust would allow for. You have the right to bring direct actions against trustees on your own. That's just fundamental and inherent. I know you know that. But what does this office create additional for you? It creates a protector and an advocate that you never had to help in that process. So I think that's the only thing that's changed in this, by addition of this House Bill 404, is it only enhances your access via direct communication with me, but it doesn't take anything away from what you had. You still already have all of those existing rights and opportunities. It simply supports.
Well, I appreciate your answer, but I respectfully disagree. I just don't think that the board has any. We sit on it sounds like you sit on a bunch of committees, and I really appreciate and understand the community council role and all of that, but I'm still not, and we'll just have to observe, but I don't see any meaningful role anymore for the board. The beneficiary role was now taken by this committee, and that's
So I would just respond with the question, what was taken away?
that the board actually voted on many of the decisions that SITLA brought to us, that brought to the board, and the board actually had the authority to had some authority as regards to SITLA.
I don't think that's accurate.
We actually had an employee
Yeah.
that worked for us that happens to be an that had that advocacy, who's no longer an employee. We based on 404.
Yeah, and let me
So-
clarify what the role of that employee was under statute. The only thing that changed was that employee was designated as the primary beneficiary under Section 53, I believe it's D or E, the SITLA statute. The primary beneficiary was the sole role, and what that meant by statute was they had the ability to be in meetings. No vote, no say, no protection, no advocacy. Okay, that role still exists. It now exists in this office, the one that you lost. It still exists, but it's in this office. But this office now has a true club, a stick to actually use.
And I don't want to be, we could extend this forever, but just tell me, how is it, I still have not heard an answer of how is it used? What do you mean by it can be used to do what?
Sure. Yeah, so the statute allows, which it did not before.
To advocate.
Yeah, from protection purposes, the statute now, which it did not allow, it allows the advocacy office to actually recommend removal of directors of the various agencies, so SITLA and SITFO. Yeah, of course, the boards of those groups have to remove, but that was a right that didn't exist before, the right to even recommend. So that's a new enhanced right.
Thanks for your answer. We'll just
Sure.
have to, it's a frustrating loss for some of us, and
Sure.
more time would probably allow us to have a more meaningful exchange, but
Yeah.
we'll do it another time.
No,
Thank
and I
you.
appreciate it, and I want you to have confidence that the loss, the taking of that primary beneficiary role and putting it with the advocacy office, I know you don't have direct control over me. I'm not your employee.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no question. But what I do want you to understand, that person didn't have rights. They had rights to information. They didn't have ability to do anything. And furthermore, I want you to have confidence that you can come to me, even though I'm not your employee, and trust that I am going to advocate for you and the school children to my best ability. And so in my mind, that's not a loss, that's an enhancement.
We have a few other comments. Board Member Janet Cannon.
Yeah, I have a little bit different background and feeling about the trust lands and the board's involvement in trust lands. I used to chair the nominating committee for several years, which had a predominant number of state board members that served on that. And we used, I think we tried to appoint Warren Peterson or get Warren Peterson one time, and he was having health issues. So I'm so thrilled that you've got him, and I'm thrilled that his health is better, and I think he'll be wonderful. So hats off to you for that. Just if you would please inform the board, can you tell us the amount of the corpus of the trust at this point in time? And what percentage of money is going to schools? I know a lot is going to schools now. I'm wondering what percentage of the total school money that schools get is constituted by those trust funds. And I read something about thinking of capping that amount. So could you address those three issues for me?
Sure, and I'll have Paula fill in, especially on the second question. The principal balance in the permanent school fund is $2.5 million approximately, and growing. And we hope to see that grow much, much larger. And we think that can happen. 2.5, and I don't mean this tongue in cheek, is not enough. It needs to grow, and it needs to grow quicker. And the one part of that doesn't go noticed, unfortunately, is the value of the land. So the SITLA still manages 3.5 million acres of real estate. And there's really no one has ever put a value on that, so nobody really knows what that is. But I think all of us know in this room that 3.5 million acres of land is a lot of land with a lot of value. And so let's not forget that. With respect to the percentage of school funding coming from the SITLA funds, I'll let Paula answer that question.
Okay, so you may recall in code, we keep track of this because the distribution going to schools cannot be more, for the school land trust program, cannot be more than 3% of the value of the minimum school program. Mm-hmm. So right now, we're at about, we're not quite at 2%.
Okay.
So we're not quite 2% of the value of the minimum school program.
And do you know what that value is?
Of the minimum school program?
Or of what you're sending?
Tell her what we distributed this year.
Oh, okay, sorry. It's $82.6 million.
And just to fill in there, on top of that, there's a distribution formula that's constitutionally mandated that essentially caps the amount of the fund that can be distributed on an annual basis at 4%. 4% of the 2.5 is the maximum amount currently constitutionally allowed. And that's a perfect area for this board to consider and take up. Is that too much? Is that too little? Is it balancing the intergenerational equities of current and future beneficiaries? I don't know the answer to that. I've started to think about it, but that's something that I would love your feedback on so that we can advocate one way or another.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. Just a quick question. What is your plan to kind of take the temperature of the different beneficiaries that you advocate for? What plan do you have to communicate and understand kind of where we're at on certain topics?
Thank you, Vice Chair. That's a really important question. When I came into this, I thought, how does one person represent 12 beneficiaries, especially where they might have conflicting interests? It appears impossible on its face. I do want to report that in the last SITLA meeting, SITLA enacted a multi-beneficiary policy that it had been working on probably since you can remember, right, Paula? To deal with issues where multiple beneficiaries share an interest in a specific project, and dealing with values and cost sharing and revenue sharing. And in their mind, it was a highly complicated process that was never going to be sorted out. The world that I came from, it happens every day. Private landowners get in deals and they do partnerships and those things happen. And so we worked on instituting a multi-beneficiary policy, and that was adopted. And it now dictates the relationship among the beneficiaries with respect to a project that has multiple beneficiaries, and how to value lands and create an ownership table and how to share revenues and how to share costs. And so that's one action that we've already taken that I think will have perpetual impact on the multiple beneficiaries. Now, to more specifically answer your question and how to balance and take temperatures of beneficiaries, it's my objective, and Jesse's going to be a big part of this, to be in constant communication with beneficiaries with respect to issues that come up involving that beneficiary. I think, fortunately for me, this doesn't happen very often with respect to project specifics where beneficiaries are on opposite sides of a project. And so when it does happen, our intent is to fully engage with them, lay on the table the facts, allow them to provide a position. If beneficiaries are not in agreement on a specific position, then I think it's difficult for the advocacy office to represent one position. We have to represent all positions. Because I have the same duty to even the 1% beneficiary that I do to the 96% beneficiary. But I also have to represent all of them with the same vigor. And if they have opposing positions, that's for the trustees to exercise their fiduciary duties in that instance.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. We're really cramped for time. And first of all, Paula, thank you for the wonderful job you and your staff have been doing while waiting for the advocate to finally get on board. And we, so thank you in advance too, because we know you're not going to back off the throttle of
Thank you.
looking after the best interest of what's happening in the schools. I hopefully it's shared. Justin, welcome aboard. Lots of eyes will be on you. Life's based
Great.
on results, and we'll be watching for those results. I want to say 3 words: opportunity, health, and wealth. And with 404, the way it changed, and that, and all of the dialogue that was behind that, I think there's other stakeholders in the education world that see this maybe as an opportunity. But I'm not going to go there. We have enough time to go back, and it's got me really nervous. And so there's members of this board that are aggressively watching and observing, and right now we're very supportive. Good things are happening with SITLA. Good things are happening with SITFO. We expect more of the same, and then we have new board members that now we have play a little different role with 404 in place, and so we're gonna learn our place, and we're gonna learn how to communicate. But thank you for coming on board. It's the job description, the compensation, everything that was attached to that. I didn't know if they'd get a candidate, so glad that they have, and the endorsements that you have. And so with that, between the legislators and the other beneficiaries, and a lot of people want that health and wealth of that money, and so we'll see what happens. And so we look forward to our relationship. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out. That it's in your hands of how you are going to make this happen. And if there's something on our end, we're certainly going to come to you and let you know. So thank you for being here and taking this position. And thanks again, Paula, for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should say Jesse too, because it's a team effort. I understand everything that's going to happen there.